My wife screamed like someone was breaking into the house. I bolted out of bed, heart pounding. It was 2:17 a.m. I grabbed the bat from under our bed and ran downstairs. I expected to see broken glass or someone in a ski mask. But what I saw stopped me cold. A girl stood on our porch, soaked from the rain. Her hair was long and dark, stuck to her face. She couldn't have been older than 20. But it wasn't her age or the time of night that shocked me. It was her face. She looked exactly like Lila. Not as she is now, but how she looked in her senior year of high school. The resemblance was so sharp, so precise, it made my stomach twist. Lila came running in behind me. Her eyes landed on the girl. Her scream turned into a gasp. The girl blinked at us, shivering. Then she said it. "You're my real parents." The silence that followed felt like it lasted forever. Lila whispered, "What did you just say?" "I'm your daughter," the girl said again, her voice shaking. "My name is Alyssa. You had me 21 years ago at Westbridge Hospital. There was a fire. You were told I died. But I didn't." Lila broke into tears on the spot. I stood frozen. My mind tried to keep up. "We had a baby once. Alyssa, born premature. We were told she didn't survive the fire. We buried a small, empty coffin. We grieved for years. Now, this girl stood in front of us claiming to be her? We brought her inside. She had no coat, just jeans, a sweatshirt, and a small backpack. Lila wrapped her in a blanket and sat her on the couch. Alyssa told us bits and pieces. She'd grown up in a small town with a woman named Jean who told her she had been adopted under special circumstances. Jean had died last year. While going through old boxes, Alyssa found a birth certificate. Our names were on it. I thought it was a mistake, she said. But then I found an old newspaper article about the hospital fire. Your names were in it. So I came here. Lila didn't say anything. She just kept staring at her, crying quietly. I asked Alyssa how she got here. She'd taken a bus. Several, actually. She had no money. Just that backpack and the paper. I asked her for proof. She looked down. I was hoping you'd want to find out. Lila took a strand of her hair the next day and mailed it in for a DNA test. While we waited, I barely spoke. Something about all of it felt off. She looked like us. Too much like us. But where had she really come from? And how could a hospital, a system, get something like this so wrong? A week later, the results came in. She was our daughter. 99.9% match. But I didn't feel relief. I felt dread. Alyssa sat at our kitchen table, turning her spoon in a cup of tea. She looked around like everything was both new and strangely familiar. Lila couldn't take her eyes off her. Every smile, every small gesture, it was like watching a ghost come home. Alyssa told us little things about her childhood. She grew up in a tiny house on a gravel road with Mama Jean, an older woman who she thought was her grandmother at first. There was no school, no friends, no phone. Just books, gardening, and old movies on DVD. She told me I was special, Alyssa said. That people would want to take me away if they knew about me. So I didn't ask questions. Lila listened closely, nodding, her fingers wrapped tight around her coffee mug. Later that day, Lila called the hospital where we'd given birth 21 years ago. She wanted the original medical records, anything with our name on it. The hospital had changed ownership since then, but after a long hold and several transfers, someone finally got back to her. They said there were no records of an Alyssa born to Mark and Lila Sutton on that date. No mention of our baby. No death certificate. No fire report. Nothing. They're lying, Lila said. They're covering something up. She started digging. Old papers, newspaper clippings, funeral home documents. But everything was either missing or vague. Even the death certificate we remembered signing was a photocopy, no official seal. That night, she brought up the idea of hiring a private investigator. I tried to talk her out of it. We don't need someone snooping around, I said, trying to sound calm. We just found our daughter. Let's not stir things up. But she looked at me strangely. Why are you so against it? I didn't have an answer. Later, when the house was quiet, I went out to the garage. I had an old metal box stored under a pile of paint cans. Inside were documents I hadn't looked at in years. Papers from my old job, some court records, a few things I probably should have destroyed long ago. I thought I was alone. I thought everyone was asleep. I lit a match and held it to the corner of the first file. Behind me, the door creaked. Lila stood there, barefoot, arms crossed, her face pale. What are you doing? She asked. I tried to explain. Told her it was just old stuff I didn't need anymore. Nothing important. She stepped closer. Looked at the papers as the flames ate them. You're hiding something, she whispered. I didn't respond. I couldn't. The flames crackled between us. From inside the house, Alyssa called out softly. Is everything okay? Lila didn't answer. She just kept staring at the fire. The private investigator's name was Don Keller. He looked like someone who didn't smile much. Thin face, dark coat, quiet voice. He handed Lila a folder one morning while I sat pretending to read the paper. She was real, he said. Name's Jeanette Granger. Lives in rural Kentucky. Locals call her Mama Jean. House is barely standing. No phone, no internet. But she's alive. Lila left the next day without asking me to come. She drove 9 hours alone. I didn't call her. I didn't know what I'd say if she picked up. The house sat at the edge of a dirt road, sagging at the middle like it had been tired for decades. Weeds choked the porch steps. A wind chime made from forks clinked slowly in the breeze. Lila knocked twice. The door opened after a long pause. "Are you Jeanette Granger?" Lila asked. The old woman peered out with cloudy eyes, thick gray hair tied in a loose knot. "Depends who's a skin. My name is Lila. I think you raised my daughter." Mama Jean blinked. Her face didn't show surprise, just confusion, then something else. Recognition, maybe. She stepped aside and let Lila in. The inside smelled like dust and old soup. There were piles of newspapers, boxes full of faded clothes, shelves crowded with empty pill bottles. They sat at a small table in the kitchen. "She told me you raised her," Lila said gently. "Alyssa." The old woman rubbed her temples. "The little one, dark hair? Always loved them birds outside? Thought she was mine, but no. I knew she weren't. You raised her since birth?" "Not birth. They brought her to me. Said her parents didn't make it. Said she needed a home where no one'd ask questions. I got cash. Big envelope. Every month for 5 years." "Who brought her?" Mama Jean shook her head. "Never knew their names. Just one man, mostly. Wore a suit. Said it was all legal." Lila noticed the woman's hand shaking as she reached for a pill bottle. She picked it up to pass it to her, and froze. The name on the bottle wasn't Jeanette Granger. It was Thomas Sutton, Mark's brother. A man who died over a decade ago. The same man who once worked at Mark's law firm. Lila didn't say anything, just quietly handed her the pills. "Do you remember where the money came from?" she asked. Mama Jean looked around the room, confused again. "Sometimes from banks. Sometimes it was just left on the porch." Lila thanked her and left. Outside, she leaned against the car and stared down at the bottle in her hand. Thomas Sutton. What the hell did he have to do with any of this? She drove home in silence, bottle hidden in her purse, and didn't tell me where she'd been. Lila didn't say much the next few days. She didn't ask me about the fire again, didn't mention Mama Jean, didn't show me the bottle she found in Kentucky. But I knew something had changed. She looked at me differently now, like I was a stranger sleeping in her house. That Saturday, she told me I should go visit my friend Dave. "Take a night," she said calmly. "Clear your head. Maybe it'll help." I didn't argue. Part of me was glad to get out. I packed a small bag and left before lunch. As soon as the front door closed, Lila went straight to my office. The room was always locked, but she had found the spare key months ago when I was in the shower. She shut the blinds, locked the door behind her, and knelt by the rug in the corner. Rolled it back. The safe was right where she remembered. Small. Steel. Hidden under a loose floorboard. She tried the code she'd once seen me punch in while I thought she was asleep. It worked. The safe opened with a low click. Inside was a black duffel bag stuffed with cash. Hundreds, maybe thousands. Below that were 3 burner phones, all with their SIM cards removed. And under those documents. She pulled them out slowly. One caught her eye immediately. A folded, crumpled piece of paper with a hospital logo in the corner. A birth certificate. It was Alyssa's. Mother, unknown. Father, Thomas Sutton. Lila's breath caught. Thomas. Mark's older brother. The one who died in a car accident 15 years ago. The one no one in the family ever talked about. She read the signature again. There was no mention of her name on the document. No Mark. No Lila. No mention of the fire. She sat back on her heels, heart racing. Something didn't make sense. Why would Thomas be listed as the father? Why was this hidden? And if Thomas had signed it, was Alyssa even our child at all? Lila put everything back exactly as she found it, but she kept the birth certificate, folded it neatly into her coat pocket. When I came home later that night, she was sitting on the couch with Alyssa, watching TV like nothing had happened. I kissed her on the forehead. She smiled faintly, but I felt the chill behind it. She knew something, and now she wasn't just angry. She was planning. Alyssa spent the morning digging through the last of the boxes she'd brought from Mama Jean's house. Most of it was junk, old baby clothes, broken toys, faded books with torn covers. But near the bottom of one box, wrapped in a dish towel, was a dusty black VHS tape with no label. "What's this?" she asked, holding it up. Lila took it gently. She looked at the tape for a long moment, then stood up and went to the garage. We still had an old TV with a VCR out there, stored next to the Christmas decorations. They plugged it in and slid the tape inside. The screen flickered. Then a grainy video appeared. A toddler sat in a crib inside a small white room. Her dark hair was messy, and she wore a pale yellow onesie. There were no toys, just a blanket and a stuffed bear. It was Alyssa, a younger version of her, barely 2 years old. She was singing to herself, softly, swaying back and forth. The camera zoomed in slightly, and that's when they heard it, someone laughing in the background. Not a stranger's laugh. It was mine. Lila froze. Alyssa turned to her, face pale. "That's him," she whispered. The video ended there. They rewound it, played it again. The laugh was louder this time, unmistakable. Not just amusement, something sharper, colder. When I came home that night, Lila didn't say hello. She stood in the doorway with the VHS tape in her hand. "Where was this taken?" she asked. I didn't answer at first. I didn't even pretend to act confused. I looked at the floor. "You were there," Alyssa said quietly. "Why? Why was I in a hospital room? Why were you filming me?" I rubbed my face and sat down, suddenly so tired I could barely keep upright. "I didn't know what else to do," I said. "It wasn't supposed to happen like that." "What wasn't?" I looked up at both of them, my wife, the woman I loved, and the girl who used to be a ghost. "I knew she was alive," I said finally. "I found out years after the fire. I was told she'd been taken, that it was handled. But then I saw her. I saw her in that room." "You lied to me," Lila said, her voice shaking. "You let me believe our baby died." "I couldn't tell you," I said. "If I did, it would have all come out, everything. Thomas, the deal, the hospital. I didn't have a choice." "There's always a choice," Alyssa said coldly. I reached out toward them. Lila stepped back. Alyssa didn't move at all. She just stared at me like I was a stranger. Lila didn't speak to me for 3 days after the tape. She stayed in the guest room with the door locked. Alyssa barely said a word. The house felt like it had cracked down the middle. I knew it was time to tell the truth. All of it. I waited in the kitchen while Lila sat across from me, arms crossed. Alyssa stood near the door, arms folded tight across her chest. "I never wanted this," I began. "But there's something you need to know." Lila didn't blink. "Start talking." I took a breath that hurt on the way out. 21 years ago, while you were pregnant, I had an affair," I said. Lila flinched. "It was with a nurse. Her name was Erica. I was scared, stupid. You were in and out of the hospital. I told myself it didn't mean anything. But then, Erica got pregnant too." Lila looked sick. "You never said anything," she whispered. "I couldn't. Then, when you lost the baby a few weeks later, I panicked. I didn't want to lose you. I came up with this plan. Erica would give me her baby. We'd raise her as ours. You wouldn't have to know." Alyssa stared at me in disbelief. "You tried to replace me?" Lila asked, her voice cracking. "I thought I was fixing things," I said, ashamed. "But Erica changed her mind. She disappeared. I couldn't find her. Then the fire happened. The hospital said she and the baby had died. So you just believed it?" Alyssa asked, her voice rising. "I didn't want to. But there were no records. No leads. I thought that was the end. And you let me bury an empty coffin," Lila said, eyes full of tears. "You watched me break apart while you kept all this to yourself. I thought I lost both of them," I said. "Our baby, and the one Erica carried. And I deserved to." Lila stood up, shaking. "So which one is she?" she asked, pointing at Alyssa. "Mine or Erica's?" I looked at the floor. "I don't know," I said. "I thought she was Erica's. But now, with everything that's come out, I'm not even sure anymore." Alyssa took a step back. "So I'm nobody's daughter?" she said, almost to herself. Lila turned away and pressed her hands to her face. Neither of us said anything. For a moment, all we could hear was the low hum of the refrigerator and the sound of Alyssa breathing hard, like she'd just been punched in the chest. Then she left the room without a word. The second DNA test arrived. Lila didn't follow white envelope, and I didn't try to stop her. Lila opened it alone in her car, parked in the corner of the grocery store lot. Her hands shook as she unfolded the paper. Not a match. 0% relation. Alyssa wasn't Mark's daughter. The truth hit like a hammer. Back at home, Lila pulled out Erica's old medical records. She'd gotten them from a retired nurse who still had access to some archived files. It took her hours to sort through them, but she finally found a DNA sample Erica had submitted when she applied to donate blood years ago. She sent that in too. The results came back 3 days later. No match. Alyssa wasn't Erica's child either. Lila sat in her room for a long time, staring at the ceiling. Then she went downstairs. Alyssa was sitting at the kitchen table, flipping through an old photo album. Lila placed the papers in front of her. Alyssa glanced at them, then closed the album slowly. "You already knew," Lila said. Alyssa didn't answer at first. Then she looked up, calm and clear-eyed. "I figured it out a year ago," she said. "After Mama Jean died, I started digging. I found her old notebooks. One had a list of names, payments. Yours and Mark's names were there." "You're not our daughter," Lila whispered. "No," Alyssa said softly. "I'm someone else's stolen child. You were just part of the chain." Lila stepped back. "Why did you come here?" Alyssa stood. Her voice didn't rise. It didn't need to. "I came for answers, but also to make sure people paid for what they did." Lila's throat tightened. "You think we stole you?" "I don't know if you did," Alyssa said. "But your husband did something. Or your brother did. Maybe both. And they weren't the only ones." "What do you mean?" Alyssa reached into her bag and pulled out a folder. Inside were printouts, photos, maps, names. notes in her handwriting. This wasn't one baby, she said. It was a system. At least 6 children taken from that hospital around the same time. Different stories, fires, record errors, stillbirths. But no bodies, no proof. Lila's face went pale. You've been investigating this? For 2 years, Alyssa said. I came here because your names were at the start of it all. I thought maybe I'd find the truth. Or someone to blame. Tears welled in Lila's eyes. So what now? Alyssa paused. That depends, she said quietly, on what your husband tells me next. She walked out of the kitchen, folder in hand. Lila sank into a chair. For the first time in her life, she wasn't sure who she was mourning, her child, her marriage, or the version of herself who used to believe the world made sense. Alyssa knocked on Lila's door late that night. She held a small metal box under her arm. Old, dented, locked with a broken latch. When Lila let her in, Alyssa set it on the kitchen table and sat down across from her. What is that? Lila asked. Alyssa opened the lid slowly. Inside were files, photographs, photocopies of hospital forms, and a thin, worn envelope marked original certificate in faded ink. She slid it across the table. Lila opened it with trembling fingers. It was a birth certificate, not one she'd ever seen before. Different hospital, different parents listed, same birth date. Same week Lila gave birth 21 years ago. Alyssa pointed to the names. These are my real parents, she said. I looked them up. They died in a car crash 2 days after I was born, but not before they checked me into the hospital with a fever. That's when I vanished. Lila's voice was barely a whisper. That was the same weekend as the fire. Alyssa nodded. I was never your daughter. Or Erica's. I was taken from another family completely. Lila stared at the paper. Why would anyone do this? Alyssa opened one of the folders in the box and pulled out several pages of typed notes. There was a trafficking ring inside the hospital. Someone at the top was swapping babies for cash, selling newborns to families who couldn't legally adopt, hiding them by falsifying death records, starting fake fires, creating confusion. Lila's stomach turned. And we were part of that. You were part of the paperwork, Alyssa said. Your names show up in early transfers, in payout lists. But I don't think you knew. Not then. Lila shook her head slowly. But Mark. Alyssa met her eyes. He knew something. Maybe not everything, but enough. She pulled out a photo from the box. It showed a group of hospital staff, nurses, doctors, administrators. In the back stood Thomas Sutton, Mark's brother, with a clipboard in his hand. I traced money back to your law firm, Alyssa said. Donations, legal filings, guardianship transfers, all connected. Lila sat back, her hands trembling. Why are you showing me this? Alyssa was quiet for a moment. Because I wanted to hate you, she said. I wanted to walk into this house and burn everything down. But you didn't know. You lost something, too. I lost my daughter, Lila said, voice cracking. Alyssa nodded. And I lost everything I should have had. The room went still. Outside, the wind rattled the window glass. Lila looked down at the files again, her eyes catching one final detail. A name. A signature. Faint, but there. Mark Sutton. She looked up. What did he do, Alyssa? Alyssa didn't answer right away. Instead, she said, it's time he tells you that himself. The police came early in the morning. 4 officers in dark uniforms knocked on the door. Lila stood frozen in the hallway. Mark, half-dressed and confused, opened the door, and within seconds they had him in handcuffs. You're under arrest, one of them said, for conspiracy, fraud, obstruction, and child trafficking. Mark looked at Lila once, his mouth slightly open, but she didn't say a word. Alyssa stood at the top of the stairs, watching without expression. They took him away in silence. Later that day, Alyssa gave her statement to the detective. She handed over everything, phone records, old emails, bank deposits, names of people involved. She even showed them the old footage from the tape, where Mark's laugh echoed through that cold room. It wasn't just about her anymore. There were other children, other families. She was determined to blow the whole thing open. A week passed before Lila visited Mark in jail. He sat across from her behind a scratched glass window, wearing an orange jumpsuit. He looked smaller now, defeated. I didn't think you'd come, he said softly. Lila stared at him. You owe me answers. Mark looked down at his hands. It wasn't supposed to be like this, he said. It started as a favor. My brother, Thomas, he asked for legal help. A friend of his was trying to adopt quietly, said the mother didn't want the baby. But then there were more cases, more money, and it got out of hand. Lila's eyes narrowed. And our baby? Did she even die in that fire? Mark's face tightened. I thought she did. That's what they told me, that the baby died, and you couldn't handle another loss. I thought, maybe I could fix it. I didn't know, he stopped, choking slightly. I didn't know they'd take your baby too. Lila froze. What did you just say? He met her eyes. I knew they were swapping babies, but I didn't know they'd take ours. I thought you lost her naturally. I didn't know she was taken. Lila stared at him, her stomach flipping. Behind her, Alyssa stood quietly, listening. Her voice was a whisper. Wait, are you saying I wasn't the only one? Mark nodded slowly. They mixed records. Covered their tracks. I only found out years later, when it was too late. Alyssa felt the floor shift under her. If she wasn't Lila's daughter, and Lila's baby didn't die in that fire, then where was her child? Where was the baby Lila gave birth to? The room fell into silence. Lila stood up, hands trembling. Alyssa didn't say anything, but in her mind, something had already started turning. They both lost daughters that night, and that meant one terrifying, impossible thing. They might still be out there. The day after the visit to the jail, Lila sat across from Alyssa at the kitchen table. Neither of them said much. The truth hung heavy in the air between them. Finally, Lila spoke. If my baby's out there, I have to find her. Alyssa nodded slowly. Then we do it together. From that moment, everything changed. They started digging through every document Alyssa had collected. Old hospital files, birth records, missing persons reports, and handwritten notes from Mama Jean's attic. Lila contacted other families who had given birth at Westbridge Hospital that some didn't want to talk. Others said strange things had happened. Babies taken to different wards, switched ID bans, sudden deaths with no explanations. Piece by piece, the story came together. There had been at least 12 babies taken over 10 years. Families were told their children had died in delivery, in fires, or from rare illnesses. But many of those babies never died. They were sold, placed into new homes with fake paperwork, often for large under-the-table payments. The names of the hospital board members came up again and again. Doctors, lawyers, and donors who kept things quiet with threats and money. Lila recognized some. One had even attended her baby's funeral. It wasn't just about finding their daughters now. It was about stopping the people who had done this. Alyssa built a map, photos, dates, lines connecting people and places. Lila wrote every detail into a binder. They worked late into the night, every night, driven by the same fire. 2 mothers. 2 missing daughters. And the terrifying thought that one of them could still be alive, out there, raised by strangers, unaware of who she really was. They brought the evidence to a journalist, someone Alyssa trusted. Within weeks, an investigation aired on national television. The story exploded. Reporters swarmed the hospital. Former employees came forward. Families started sharing their stories. The truth couldn't be hidden anymore. Arrests were made. Documents were unsealed. Graves were reopened. But not everyone on Alyssa's list ended up in handcuffs. Some names simply vanished. Donors disappeared. Board members resigned. One doctor died in a quiet accident weeks before he was due to testify. And sometimes, Lila noticed strange cars parked near their house. Once, Alyssa's laptop was wiped clean overnight. They're watching, Alyssa said. They're scared. But they kept going. And one day, a letter arrived. No return address. Inside was a photo of a young woman, age 21, with Lila's eyes and Mark's jawline, standing in front of a church in Nevada. There was no note. Just the photo. Lila held it in her hands for a long time, her heart racing. It wasn't over, but it was a start.
Hi besties, thank you so much for watching to the end. Please remember to like, comment and subscribe.